to another program of Student Readers. My name is Sheri Doerr, and today the 5th grade students at Mount St. Mary's would like to share with you some of their favorite stories. We hope you enjoy them.
Hi, my name is Jared Vogel, and I'm going to be reading Shark Beneath the Reef. A thump and kersplash awoke Thomas Torres. He blinked his eyes and listened. Thump, kersplash. It was 5 a.m. His pelican alarm clock was going off. The brown pelicans were up. They were diving into the sea in the blue darkness, plunging head first to scoop up fish in their enormous beaks with nets of skin. On the 4th kersplash, Thomas rolled to his feet. Yawning, he stepped outside from the palapa, an architectural wonder of Palo Blanco trees, tree posts gracefully roofed and walled with palm leaves. He heard the deep, soft breathing of his grandfather and uncle, still asleep on the sandy floor of their airy palapa house. Thomas strode out to the palm porch and looked from the island of Coronados, where he stood, across the Sea of Cortez to the peninsula of Baja California, Mexico, a mountain range in the sea that is the toe of the Rockies. The mountains stretched north and south from horizon to horizon, and in the low light they looked like a gargantuan cutout of a jaw of shark's teeth. Above them, stars shone as bright as fire. The sun would not be up for an hour. Thomas ran down the white coral beach to the water. Good morning, he called to the pelicans. Wading up to his waist, he took a breath and dived into the water as clear as air. With the grace of a sea lion, Thomas sped through the crowd of awakening fish that were beginning to school up for the day. Near the bottom, he rolled onto his back and looked up. Above him darted a flock of little diving birds. They swam in spurts and dashes as they chased fish. Thomas shot to the surface. "Excuse me," he said to the tiny-eared grebes as he exploded into their midst. Unabashed, the small loon-like bird swam closer to him. "Go home to your pools in the United States," he said. "This is my cove." Thomas laughed from his belly to his eyes, a laugh so joyful that it often turned people's heads to see who could be so happy. He lunged to catch a grebe. When it dived, he began counting. The bird did not pop up to breathe for 2 whole minutes. "I wish I could stay down as long as you can," he said as the grebe paddled toward him, head underwater, looking for fish. When it dived again, Thomas swam with it into the night-filled depths of the cove waters. 1, 2, 3, he began. At 55, he burst to the surface. The bird was still underwater. "If I could hold my breath as long as you," he went on, "I could catch the whale shark my uncle saw, the one that tore my grandfather's net." The net lay on the beach not far from a palapa, like a cobweb torn by an eagle. Thomas flipped onto his back and kicked toward shore. "I would jab him in the heart," he thought, "and bring him up on my spear. I can do it. I will carry the shark above my head through the streets of Loretto. The mission bells will ring. The padre will say, good has won over evil. The fishermen of Loretto will sing, Thomas is brave, Thomas is strong, he killed the net ripper. The fishermen will dance and sing and feast for 10 days and 10 nights. Thank you for listening to me read this book. If you'd like to know how it ends, you can check it out at your local library.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Pierce, and I'm going to be reading from the book The Island Stallion's Fury from the Black Stallion series. The foal never moved while Steve held him with one arm around his chest and the other beneath his rump. The eyes of the boy and the colt were the same, dazed and unseeing. Finally, Steve turned his eyes away from the valley and focused them upon the foal. What was he going to do with him? And how could he get him back to the mare? And if he didn't, how could he keep him alive? Bewilderment left his eyes now to be replaced by worry, concern, even fear for the life of the soft, slippery foal in his arms. Don't get excited, he told himself. Put him down, put him down. You can't do anything with him in your arms. Be calm, you'll get him back to the mare. Everything will be all right. Pitch will help you. Pitch. He put down the foal and turned quickly in the direction of the ledge. Pitch, he shouted, but there was no answer from his friend, no sign of him. Pitch was still sleeping. Again, Steve let his eyes travel over the foal standing so close beside him. The tiny hooves never moved, but the skinny body with its ribs showing prominently beneath the wet coat wavered a little. Steve put a hand on the colt to steady him. You'll be all right, he said in a broken voice. He tried to get a grip on himself, then repeated his words, more convincingly this time. He spoke for his own benefit as much as the foal's. She'll come back. I know she'll come back for you. But he wasn't at all certain of this. And with that knowledge, fear rose within him again. If the mare didn't return for her foal, or if he couldn't get him back to her, the colt would die. Why hadn't he left the mare alone? Why couldn't he have stayed away from the clearing? And if he had not been there to pick up the colt to confuse the mare, she might have accepted both her twins. He knew nothing about a foaling mare. It would have been so much better if he had just left her alone. But she might have abandoned the colt anyway, Steve said aloud in his own defense. I know that. I read it somewhere, or someone told me. The colt turned large, blurred eyes upon him, not understanding what had happened. Steve felt the fear still rising within him again. You've got to do something, he told himself. Try to remember what you've read in all those course books. Try to remember. I will, he promised. I'll try to remember. Foaling mares, newly born foals. There were chapters on it. Twin foals. There's something on twin foals. When a mare has twins, she may very often neglect one foal. Neglect, not abandon. Nothing I ever read said the mare completely abandons one of her twins. So she might accept this colt, take him back, if I can only get him to her. Steve got to his feet and ran from the clearing. With Pitch's help, he might be able to do it. But once more in the wild canyon, he came to a sudden stop and turned her back. Gradually, he was recalling what he read should be done for a newly born foal. He grabbed several large green leaves from the cane stalks on his way back to the clearing. Dropping to his knees before the foal, Steve cleaned the mucus from the small nostrils so the colt would have no trouble breathing. Then he removed some from the corners of the eyes, which were now very slowly following his movements. He ran the dry leaves over the wet coat. Soon the sun would be over the walls of the valley, drying the foal more thoroughly than he could do now. If you'd like to see how this book ends, check it out at your local library. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Brett Lewis, and I will be reading The Three Little Wolves and the Big Bad Pig. Once upon a time, there were three cuddly little wolves with soft fur and fluffy tails who lived with their mother. The first was black, the second was gray, and the third was white. One day, their mother called the three little wolves around her and said, "My children, it's time for you to go out into the world. Go and build a house for yourselves, but beware of the big bad pig." "Don't worry, Mother, we'll watch out for them," said the three little pigs, and they set off. Soon they met a kangaroo who was pushing a wheelbarrow full of red and yellow bricks. "Please will you give us some of your bricks?" asked the three little wolves. "Certainly," said the kangaroo, and she gave them lots of red and yellow bricks. So the three little wolves built themselves a house of bricks. The very next day, the big bad pig came prowling down the road and saw the house of bricks that the three little wolves had built. The three little wolves were playing croquet in the garden when they saw the big bad pig coming. They ran inside and locked the door. The pig knocked on the door and grunted, little wolves, let me come in." No, said the three little wolves. "By the hair of our chin-chin-chins, we will not let you in. Not for all the tea leaves from a China teapot." "Then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house down," said the pig. So he huffed and he puffed and he puffed and he huffed, but the house didn't fall down. But the pig wasn't called big and bad for nothing. He went and fetched his sledgehammer and knocked the house down. The three little wolves only managed to escape before the bricks crumbled, and they were very frightened indeed. "We shall have to build an even stronger house. We shall have to build a stronger house," they said. Just then they saw a beaver who was mixing concrete in a concrete mixer. "Please will you give us some of your concrete?" asked the three little wolves. "Certainly," said the beaver, and he gave them buckets and buckets full of messy, slurry concrete. So the three little wolves built themselves a house of concrete. Thank you for listening to me read. If you want to know how the wolves defeat the pig, check this book out at your local library. Hello, my name is Christy Humphrey, and I'm reading Shoebag. Like all cockroaches, Shoebag was named after his birthplace. He was snoozing there now, in the open toe of a white summer sandal. He was having his old dream of growing big enough to squash the seven-legged black jumping spider and moving somewhere warm and dark and filled with meats, cheeses, sweets, and starches. All of Shoebag's family dreamed about living in a safer neighborhood, even though this building in Boston was home sweet home. Already they had lost 2 aunts and a cousin to the black jumping spider, and one grandfather plus several uncles to the waterbugs, beetles, wasps, centipedes, and the dreaded fumes of Zack. Their apartment was fumigated on the first Monday of every month, when they had to scamper through the underground passages to the buildings next door. There they waited until the dreaded fumes were gone. Then they went back. Boston, Massachusetts was known for its cold, cold winters. But even if the family was lucky enough one day to get a ride in a box going somewhere else, there was no assurance that they would be settled in a warmer climate. Neighbors they knew had escaped in the packaging crate some time ago, only to find themselves in Bangor, Maine, where it was even colder. "Wake up, Shoebag," his mother shouted. "The jumping spider in the kitchen has let down his drag line. He'll be here soon." Of all their enemies, the black jumping spider was the fiercest, and almost as violent as his fat and hairy brown brother from next door. Quick and tricky, he had no web. He let himself down from high levels on a drag line of silk. "Death to all insects!" he cried out, for like all spiders, he was not an insect, but an arachnid. He had no jaws, but he had many eyes. He would have had 8 legs, as all arachnids do, except for that person cat from the 3rd floor pulled one off. "Shoebag!" his mother's voice again, this time from the top of the Reebok next to the sandal. "Hurry up, get your Circe moving!" A Circe is what cockroaches call their tails. Shoebag was anxious to get his Circe moving. His mother's antenna made a light puff of air. A Circe is remarkably sensitive, and even a light puff of air directed at the Circe sends a cockroach scurrying. Shoebag did not move. The trouble was, Shoebag couldn't get his Circe to go. The reason was, Shoebag's Circe was missing. So were 2 back legs, 2 middle legs, and his 2 front legs. So were his antennas. Something terrible had happened to Shoebag. Shoebag's mother was named Drainboard. His father's name was Under the Toaster. When Drainboard took a good look at Shoebag, her wings fluttered down, her shell quivered, and she called out, "Under the Toaster, come here immediately! Something happened to Shoebag!" "Something terrible has happened to me," Shoebag said. "I'm changed." "You certainly are changed," Drainboard said. Under the Toaster hopped out of the black loafer and stared in horror at his son. "You really are changed. Ugh, are you?" "I have tiny hands, I have tiny feet, and I have a tiny nose, tiny ears, and I have a tiny head. With hair." "You have eyebrows and eyelashes," Drainboard groaned. You have a neck and stomach," Under the Toaster complained. "I have become a tiny person," said Shoebag. Thank you for listening to me read this book. If you'd like to find out what happens to Shoebag, check it out at your local library.
Hi, I'm Molly Maloney, and I will be reading from The Cricket in Times Square. Chapter 10, The Dinner Party. Late one night, Chester Cricket was very busy inside the newsstand. As soon as the Bellinis went home, he hopped out of the matchbox and began to clean up. First, he pushed the box in so its sides were even, and then slid it over beside the alarm clock. Next, he pulled a piece of Kleenex out of the Kleenex box and dragged it back and forth across the shelf. When the shelf was dusted, he picked up the tissue paper in his 2 front legs and polished the cricket cage so its bars shone. He wiped off the glass in front of the alarm clock and the radio, too, until he could see his own reflection. The dial of the clock was luminous, and it shed a very soft green light. Chester wanted everything to be perfect on this particular evening. There was going to be a party. It was exactly 2 months since Chester had arrived in New York, and the 3 animals wanted to celebrate the anniversary. Nothing too formal, you understand, just a little dinner for everyone. Tucker Mouse had volunteered to let them use the drain pipe, but Chester didn't want to eat amidst all the waste and rubbish his friend had collected. So after many conferences, they resolved on a newsstand. It was sheltered, quite big enough, and the radio could provide nice background music. Tucker Mouse jumped up beside Chester. "How is the food coming, Tucker?" asked the cricket. Tucker had been put in charge of refreshments. "Hick, hick, hick," laughed Tucker Mouse, rubbing his 2 front feet together. "Wait till I tell you." He lifted up 1 foot. "I have 2 chunks liverwurst, 1 sliced ham, 3 pieces bacon from bacon, lettuce and tomato sandwich, some lettuce and tomato from said sandwich, whole wheat, rye, and white crust, a big glob of coleslaw, 2 squares from a Hershey chocolate bar, the end of an O. Henry candy bar with nuts, and now comes the climax." Tucker paused. "Iced soft drinks." "How did you get the ice?" asked Chester. "Wait till I tell you," said Tucker. "All day I've been hiding behind the lunch counter. When the soda jerks made a Coke, I grabbed the ice they spilled, which I then took to the drain pipe. There, he went on with a special pride, it is happening. I have a heat-proof insulated bag saved up for just an occasion. I put the ice in, shut the opening. We have ice. Nice, eh? He sat back on his haunches and grinned at Chester. Very nice, said Chester. Where have you got the drinks? In paper cups, said Tucker, and no mixing of drinks either. For each kind, soft drink, another cup. That's wonderful, said the cricket with admiration. Oh, it's nothing really, said Tucker, waving a foot. I mean, it's something, but nothing too much. He looked around at the shelf and the clock and everything. You are to be congratulated on cleanliness. Of course, it isn't as important as food getting, but to be clean is very nice too. While they were talking, Harry Cat came in through the opening at the side of the newsstand. Chester hopped down like a good host to greet his new guest. How was the concert? He asked. Henry had been down to Washington Square to hear an open-air concert chamber of music. How you could play chamber music outdoors, Chester didn't understand, but it was New York, and anything could happen. If you would like to know how this story ends, you can check this book out at your local library. Hi, my name's Katie Imstall, and I am reading Sea Star.
Paul was separating each silver hair in Misty's tail. At his feet lay a little pile of blackberry brambles, which he had removed one by one. With an air of secrecy, he looked around quietly to make sure no outsider could overhear what he was about to say. But he and his sister Marie were quite alone in the barn yard of the pony ranch except for the wild foal and the ponies. There was no need to whisper, but Paul did whisper, and he seemed to be laughing at a private little joke of his own. How'd you like to see Misty's tail braided? Braided? Marie dropped the gunny sack with which she was brushing Misty's coat and stared. How silly! Whoever heard of a wild Chincoteague pony with a braided tail? Nobody except you and me. Paul looked around again, chuckling to himself. Nobody'll ever know except the guinea hens and ducks and the geese and who listens to them. Surprise crept into Marie's voice. How'd you like to guess, Paul? Guess what? That I've been hankering to do Misty's up those pictures we saw in the paper, the ones of the horses at the big show. Paul laid the comb and he had been using on Misty's rumps. Mental telegraphy, of course. Mrs. Vick says when two people think the same thing, it's mental telegraphy. She does? Yes, and I believe it. Paul's voice no longer whispered. It charcled in amusement. For 2 nights now, I've been dreaming Misty was a famous steeplechaser, and we had to braid her tail and mane and trim off her forelock and whiskers and clean her coat until if you patted her hip, you couldn't raise a single puff of dust, not a puff. Marie dipped a corner of the goonie sack in a pail of water and began scrubbing Misty's knees. If you'd like to hear how the story ends, check it out at your local library.
Hi, my name is Christy, and I'm reading Black Beauty. Chapter 1, My Early Home. The first place that I can remember was a large, pleasant meadow. As a colt, I lived there with my mother. The grass was sweet, and the air was fragrant. I was born with a white star marking on my forehead and one white foot. My coat was shiny and black. The master who owned us was a kind man. Often he came to the gate with carrots for my mother and pieces of bread for me. I galloped through the meadow with the other colts. Sometimes we liked to play rough. My mother called me to her. You must not bite or kick, she instructed me, or in any way be ill-bred. Always walk proudly and lift your feet up when you gallop. I raced back to play with my friends, keeping in mind the advice my mother gave me. Each day I grew taller and more strong. Chapter 2, My Breaking In. When I was 4 years old, I overheard the master say that he must break me in. Breaking in is a very important time for a horse. It is when they are taught to wear a saddle and a bridle and to carry a rider. The first time my master put a bit in my mouth, I tried to yank free. A bit is a cold piece of hard steel that is pushed into a horse's mouth. It is held fast by straps. My master fed me with a saddle, and which felt tight around my belly and heavy on my back, which he made it easier for me by offering me oats, which I loved. He stroked my neck and talked to me gently. Soon I got used to the strange feel of the bit in the saddle. My master rode me around the meadow, then hitched me to a cart and taught me to trot steadily. When I had learned, he knew I was ready for sale. A horse never knows who will buy him, my mother told me. I hope you fall into good hands. Some masters are thoughtful like ours, but others are foolish and cruel and ought to never have a horse or dog to call their own. Still I say, do your best and keep up your good name. I said goodbye to my mother, and later I would have the cause to remember what she said. Chapter 3, Bittrick Park. I was sold to a squire who lived on an estate called Bittrick Park. When I arrived, I was led to a large clean stall in the stable with the other horses. It was airy and clean. It was an airy and clean stall in the stable with the other horses. It was pleasant. The coachman brushed my coat until it shone like a rock swing. He brought me to the hall to display me for Squire Gordon and his wife. What shall we call him? The squire asked. He's really quite a beauty, said his wife. He has a sweet face and an elegant eye. What do you say we call him Black Beauty? Black Beauty, said Squire Gordon. Yes, it will be his name. Thank you for listening to me read. If you want to know how the story ends, please check it out at your local library.
Hi, my name is Alicia Guerra, and I will be reading Voyage on the Great Titanic, the Diary of Margaret Ann Brady from the Dear America series. I have just returned from the boat deck after shrugging on Father's wool coat as a dressing gown and slipping into my button boots. People were walking by on their way to the deck to see if perhaps we struck another ship. Others feel we may have grazed an iceberg as the weather is so cold tonight. I knocked on Mrs. Carstairs' door, but she told me she was trying to sleep, and I should do the same, as any sensible person would do at this hour. I am, however, inclined to get dressed and go up to this deck to examine the situation for myself. I know he is busy, but I am even tempted to go find Robert and ask him if... Wait, something is different. I'm not sure what, but everything seems different. There's been a change in the atmosphere that I cannot quite distinguish. My ears feel a little hollow, and that is the difference. I can no longer hear the soothing, constant vibration of the engines. Over the past few days, that has become a comforting background noise. And now, just like that, it's gone. I wonder why. Voices out in the hall keep saying the word iceberg, but no one seems upset. Maybe this sort of event is routine in ocean travel. It seems odd that the engines would stop, so I hope they are not damaged in any way. Maybe they are just running more slowly, which is why I can no longer hear them. I think I will go find Robert now, since I know that he will relieve my curiosity. This must be routine. What else could it be? Monday, 15th of April, 1912. My hands are shaking. I feel hot tears struggling against my eyes, and I have no idea where to begin. I feel a driving need to tell everything properly, exactly as it happened, but my mind is cluttered with confusion and exhaustion and despair and grief. I'm overcome by grief. The boat deck. I'll go back to the boat deck and follow the evening from there. Or, no, the story begins earlier, so that is where I will start. It was after midnight, and I could still hear people moving about in the passageway. Before I had time to go out and join them, there was a sharp knock on my door. I opened it to see Robert. He was smiling, but his eyes looked urgent. Good evening, Miss Brady, he said. You need to put on something warm and report to the boat deck with your life belt. Miss Brady? When I heard that, I felt alarmed for the first time, but I was also startled. Had I done something to offend him? That would be terrible. I must have looked upset because he reached out to pat my arm. A routine drill, he said, no need to fret. I knew he needed to get on with his duties, so I found a smile for him and nodded. If he said it was routine, it must be routine. Robert started for the next stateroom, but then he stopped. You'll not want to take your time, Margaret, he said in a very quiet voice. It did not seem possible, but maybe this was not a drill. Thank you for listening to me read this book. If you would like to know what happens to the Titanic and Margaret, You can check the book out at your local library.
Hi, I am Jonathan Shockey, and I'm going to read Pearls of Lutra. Though Tansy was still only a young hedgehog, she was known to be a veritable rock of good sense by the elders of Redwall. Because of this, she was one of the few youngsters allowed outside the abbey walls, mainly to gather materials for Sister Celia's remedies. Fine spring sunshine, tying light green from the permanent new leaves, filtered down through the high canopy of mossfeller wood, and somewhere off deeper in the woodlands, a cuckoo sang its repetitive era to the growing season. Tansy put her basket down upon the mossy knoll and began setting out food. A little chunk of yellow cheese, small flowers of soft nut bread, a few candied chestnuts, and a flagon of elberry Cornwall. Fussily, she dusted out the insides of 2 wooden beaks with her apron. Then she peered about at the surrounding tree trunks. "I know you're there, Ervin. Now come out this instant, or I'll eat all this lunch and you won't get a crumb," she called. The tiny squirrel leaped from the nearby elm, landing neatly and sitting position right next to her. Tansy stiffed her surprise at this sudden appearance and bushed herself, unfolding 2 clean serviettes as she lectured her charred servant. "What have you been told about wandering off? Did you know I'm responsible for you? Just look at those mucky paws. Wipe them off on the moss before you touch a single thing, you maggot." Thank you for listening to me read this book. If you'd like to know how this book ends, you can check it out at your local library.
Hi, my name is Ariana Prusa, and I'm reading the book A Horse Called Wonder by Joanna Campbell from the Thoroughbred series. From the front porch of her new home, Ashley Griffin looked out to the rolling pastures and white fenced paddocks of Townsend Acres. It seemed so strange to be here, know that this is where they would be living from now on. The last few months had been the most horrible in Ashley's 12 years. First, a virus had swept through her family's own breeding farm at Gardale, farther north in Kentucky. 5 of their breast broodmares and 1 foal had died. As if that hadn't been bad enough, the parents had made the sad announcement that their insurance did cover their losses, and Ed Gardale would have to be put up for sale and the remaining stock sold. They'd have to find work somewhere else. Luckily, they had been able to as breeding managers at Townsend Acres. Ashley felt like crying just thinking about it. Townsend Acres was as beautiful and well kept as Ed Gardale, with dozens of sleek thoroughbreds romping in the paddocks. But it isn't Ed Gardale, Ashley thought, and the horses aren't ours. They all belong to the owner, Clay Townsend, who Ashley was sure to be awful. She banged her fist down on the porch railing. She was furious with her parents for selling Ed Gardale. She felt angry about everything. Sighing heavily, she went back inside the house, where Mr. and Mrs. Griffin were in the kitchen having coffee. They both looked tense and tired. Maybe she shouldn't be so mad at them. They looked like they felt as bad as she did. "Ready to go on our tour?" her mother asked. "Why don't you run up and get your brother and sister?" Ashley went to the front hall and up the staircase to the 2nd floor. "Caroline, Rory," she called as she reached the landing. "Come on, we're going." When she didn't get an answer, she walked up the hall and into the bedroom where she would share it with her older sister. With her radio blaring away, Caroline was hanging some clothes in the closet. She was 15, 3 years older than Ashley, and incredibly neat. Already, a line divided the room. Caroline's head was immaculate, and on Ashley's side, boxes were piled near the bed waiting to be unpacked, and the bed was rumpled and covered with horse magazines. Caroline turned from the closet. "I'm busy, and besides, I don't care about seeing Townsend Acres." I don't want to either, Ashley said, but we're gonna be stuck living here. Aren't you even a little curious? Can't be that much different from Edgardale. It's bigger. Dad said they even have their own training stable. So what? I'm sick of horses and everything to do with them. I'm staying here and putting my clothes away. At that moment, and their 7-year-old brother, Roy, hurtled into the room. I'm ready, he shouted. He was too young to understand what had happened at Edgardale. His red gold hair was sticking up all over his head, and there was a smudge of dirt on one of his cheeks. Caroline had the same red gold hair, except that hers was perfectly combed. Only Ashley's had their father's dark hair and hazel eyes. Roy raced up and jumped on Caroline's bed. Caroline screeched and grabbed an armful of clothes she'd been getting ready to hang. Go jump on Ashley's bed, she cried. It's a mess anyways. Thank you for listening to me read this book, and if you'd like to know how it ends, check it out at your local library.
We love reading. Read good books.
What grade are you in?
5th grade.
What school do you go to?
Mount St. Mary's.
And what do you love?